Week 12 is officially in the books, and Chris Lovitt and I are looking back at the games to point out who sucked this week.
One of the things definitely that we need to talk about this week is the way the NFL handled the COVID situation in the Broncos Saints game and also in the Ravens Steelers game. It's my opinion that the Denver Saints game should never have been allowed to be played. It was only ever going to end one way. There's no way a team can win a game, not even with their starting quarterback, not their backup, not their backup's backup. They had a guy playing wide receiver they had a guy playing quarterback who was a wide receiver in college, didn't even get to start on his college team at quarterback. And what that meant was the game itself and the brand of the NFL, I think, was harmed a bit by this game. And what I mean by that is the game was awful to watch. I mean, anyone who watched that game, nobody would ever say that was fun to watch. It was entertaining. There was ever any doubt about the outcome of it. And I think what that led to was the game itself not performing as it should, of course, which you would obviously expect. But also, I found myself thinking there's no way they would have played that game if there was fans in the stands. You know, if people had paid money to come and watch this game, there's no way they would have ever allowed that game to go ahead. And I think if you're a Broncos fan or a Broncos player, you should feel really hard done by watching the games of watching other teams' games get postponed to suit them and their COVID situation. And yeah, I think you should feel really hard done by if you're in any way affiliated with the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, it was an absolute joke. I totally agree with you. I have no idea why the NFL didn't postpone it. I mean, I felt very sorry for Hilton, the wide receiver that had to be a quarterback this game, because I mean, some players apparently didn't even know who he was. Like some players on the team didn't know who he was, and a few hours later or a day later, he was supposed to throw passes to them, and it was just it was a sad game to watch. I mean, it was every now and then you had Philip Lindsay in as the quarterback for with the Wildcat formation. But otherwise, I mean, we all knew it's going to be just a bloodbath, and the Saints are just going to roll over them because, what else can you expect? I mean, they even tried to suit up like assistant coaches or some coaches to play quarterback, and the NFL denied that. So, the NFL really didn't seem to care about the situation at all, especially when you think about how much effort they put into this Ravens Steelers game today.
Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. And the one thing as well, I alluded to, there's no way they would have allowed it to be played if there was fans there. And I also thought back to the game last year in week 17 last year when the 49ers played the Seahawks, and Dre Greenlaw came up with that excellent goal line stop to clinch the 1 seed for the 49ers. And could you imagine if the COVID outbreak occurred in that game and let's say the 49ers had no quarterbacks? There's no way the league would ever have allowed that game to be played then, and they just seemed fine to throw the Broncos to the sword. And yeah, like I say, they should feel really hard done by with that.
Yeah, what's weird for me and what like kind of almost pisses me off is that kind of like there's no set rule apparently. The NFL doesn't have a set rule on how to handle these situations with COVID. Like you have the Broncos Saints game that doesn't get postponed. You have the Steelers Ravens game that first gets postponed from Thursday to Monday, then I think to Tuesday as well, and then now to Wednesday. And then you had our game, like the San Francisco 49ers game that was on a Thursday night against the Packers that didn't get postponed. And the 49ers basically had to play with loads and loads of backup players and obviously got beaten very handily by the Packers. So it's kind of, seems to be two different sort of rules.
Yeah, and it's clear we're playing in unprecedented circumstances. There's a pandemic going on, and I totally understand that some games may get pushed back, some need to be postponed, but maybe to have a bit of consistency would be what the NFL needs. And to be honest, going towards the playoffs and the bigger games, especially in week 17 when you've got all of the divisional games, This year, the Rams are playing the Cardinals in Week 17. So going towards those bigger games, the NFL needs to have more consistency in how they're dealing with this. I know they've got some blanks in the schedule that they can flex games to, but when it comes to the playoffs, let's say the AFC title game and Mahomes gets or tests positive, I can't see a way the NFL would allow a game to go ahead without their stars playing in the biggest games.
Yeah, I mean, they need to do some kind of a bubble system anyways, I think, for the playoffs, like the NBA did and the NHL.
Yeah,
To just kind of put the whole AFC and the whole NFC in some sort of locations to be some set rules, especially for the playoffs that are about to come.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's just totally ruining the brand. You know, the Broncos quarterback finished with 1 completion for 12 yards and 2 interceptions off of 9 passes. You know, no one wants to see that. Nobody will pay to see that. And yeah, it will harm the brand in the long run if the NFL doesn't control this.
The first negative thing for me kind of this week was the Raiders. Like, they had like one of their best performances against the Chiefs a week before and like almost beat them. And they actually beat the Chiefs already in this season. So that was actually the only loss for the Chiefs so far. So you would think the Raiders could be a playoff team, but then they just got, I mean, absolutely embarrassed with like the 6-43 loss to the Falcons. And it was the most lopsided loss for the Raiders since Thanksgiving weekend 2014. I just have no clue what the hell happened to them.
Yeah, and in a razor tight AFC, there's 9, 10 playoff contenders. You can't afford to be dropping games to the Falcons like the Raiders did. That's a winnable game that I'm sure John Gruden had that one circled as a win, especially after the way the Falcons have been so up and down this season. But I think they just caught the Falcons on a very bad day. The Raiders definitely didn't execute very well. They turned the ball over. They got stopped on 4th down a couple of times. And yeah, credit to the Falcons. I think they were fairly good, but yeah, it was a terrible performance overall from the Raiders.
Yeah, specifically also from Derek Carr, who I'm still not kind of sold on as like the long-term future for the Raiders. He had no touchdowns, 1 interception, and 3 lost fumbles. And the Raiders in total had 5 turnovers. You cannot win a game in the NFL, doesn't matter who the opponent is, with 5 turnovers almost. That's just not how you get to the playoffs, let alone win a game.
Yeah, and that the 5 turnovers. I mean, if you just looked at the game stats and took away the turnovers, it's actually a fairly even game. The Falcons only had 304 yards of offense. The Raiders had 243. There's no way you would expect one team to win that game by 37. But as you said, if you turn the ball over 5 times, you allow 5 sacks, and you only possess the ball for 25 minutes, you're never going to win a game in the NFL. So to move on to my second disappointment for the week, I'm going to go with the Bears and specifically the Bears offense. Nobody expected the Bears offense to be amazing at the start of this season, but I don't think anyone expected it to be this bad either. Just watching the Bears, it's hard to watch at times. They can't run the ball. The quarterback only gets around 2 seconds to throw the ball. Their offensive line is terrible. And it's just not fun to watch the Bears. There's obviously something wrong with whether you want to put the blame on the quarterbacks, the coach and the play calling, even the GM. But something's really got to change with the Bears because they're really not in a good state at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, they have now lost 5 straight games. They started the season out very hot, even though I thought their wins were not really impressive at all. But still, they lost 5 straight games, and now like they've fallen out of the playoff picture very rapidly. And yeah, you're totally right. It's just the Bears' offense is just a mess. I mean, they were down 27-3 before they even had run 15 offensive plays. And it doesn't seem to matter if Trubisky is in a QB or Nick Foles, which kind of makes me believe that there's definitely a coaching like error there. Like that the coach doesn't like you have to look at the coaches, definitely. They share the blame because apparently it doesn't matter which QB is in, they're not going to seem to produce on offense.
Yeah, definitely. And the most surprising thing about that is Matt Nagy comes from an offensive background. He was the quarterback's coach, and for 1 year, he was the offensive coordinator at Kansas City, who had a very good offense back then and obviously now. But it just seems like he's a bit lost of ideas. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether he's got Trubisky there, Foles there. They can't seem to get anything going on offense. Um, and they've also not. They can also thank Ryan Pace for that as well. The last couple of draft classes haven't been great, and there's been some glaring needs that he's just completely failed to address. Obviously, the main one being the O-line. If you look at that O-line, they've got just across the 5 starters, there's 2 7th-round picks and an undrafted free agent. They've invested very little capital there, and you see they can't run the ball, and the quarterback is constantly under pressure and running for his life on every play.
Yeah, it's been very disappointing the last few seasons. I still remember kind of the first year where the Bears had Matt Nagy when he was coming in. Like the play calling was quite inventive, and he kind of used a lot of trick plays, and you could see he was trying to do the same things that worked for him in Kansas City, and it seemed to work. But somehow, I don't know if he just either lost faith in Trubisky, and that's why he kind of his like playbook has like diminished, or he just has kind of lost his touch. But yeah, they're definitely a very disappointing team.